know that we are recording this session, and our intent is to post on our school website. My executive assistant, Mrs. Mashari, she's in the process right now of, she will be scribing the questions. We ask as questions for yourself, as questions come about, just type them into the chat feature at the end of the presentation. We will take some time to begin answering questions for you. If it's like the last session, we had so many questions that we did stop. And what my intent is to gather those questions. And if I do not answer them tonight, we will have a written response that we will email via final forms to all of you. So your questions will be answered. And again, we want to be respectful of everyone's time this evening. We know that you're busy. And our presentation, while it is a bit lengthy, we feel that you as parents, community members deserve to have as much detail outlining not only the restart, but the process that has led us to the decisions that we have made to this point. So I would like to get started, and I'd also like to thank Dr. Julie McDonald, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction. She'll be presenting this evening, and also our Director of Special Services, Special Education, Mrs. Holly Charville. She will be participating this evening as well, so thank those ladies. Quickly, I'd like to acknowledge the work of so many who've been part of this process. We actually began discussions on ReStart back in mid-April. Once we learned we were not going to return to school in the spring, we took a quick pivot and started discussing what school will look like come this fall, late summer, early fall. And as we're all aware right now that what we know today may be completely different tomorrow, so keeping that in mind. But again, I want to thank so many. We have had over 60 teachers, administrators, support staff, board members, parents who have actually participated in the planning process and who continue to participate. So I will recognize those folks a bit more formally later. If we could change slides, Dr. McDonald. As I mentioned, the restart planning began back as early as April. We began surveying our parents, you folks. We have a couple of surveys out right now asking for different bits of information from you. We also surveyed our staff, our faculty and staff, in a written document. And as I mentioned earlier, they are actually taking an active role in the restart planning. About a week ago, some of you may have received phone calls to take a deeper dive and to gather more information, more content, more feedback. We randomly selected almost 100 parents, 100 families, and we began cold calling, seeking that input. So thank you if any of you participated in that. We've had a district level team who has really worked diligently outlining a global perspective of what the restart will look like. But we also have individual building task force teams who are taking the information from the building or district level, information we're going to share tonight, and they're actually devising plans of what all this will look like in Shawnee, at Woodlands, McCormick, and obviously the high school. And the plans will look different at Shawnee than they do at Huron High School, as they should. We have different needs at different buildings, so they will look different. We've also had the opportunity, which I'm absolutely grateful for, to collaborate with our area school districts, not only from Erie County, but from around the region. We've had some absolutely fantastic conversations along the way. We continue to have those conversations, sharing ideas, sharing strategies, sharing concerns. That's been wonderful. And we've also, and I have to thank our own, Huron's own Health Commissioner, Erie County Health Department Commissioner, Mr. Pete Shade. He has made himself readily available at all hours of the day and night. Really a 24/7, he's been available as a resource for us. So if you see Mr. Shade in the local drugstore or at church or out to dinner, just give him an attaboy, because he's been an absolute phenomenal resource for us. We've also studied restart plans locally. We've studied restart plans from around the region, from really across the country. And actually, several school districts around the globe had actually restarted as early as last spring. So we've researched plans as well from those who have successfully taken on this adventure, if you will. And we've also relied heavily upon health experts from the Cleveland Clinic, university hospitals, obviously the Cleveland Center for Disease Control, the CDC, and the Ohio Department of Health. They have all been phenomenal resources for us. So giving you that bit of background on how we went about researching and studying what will be the best practice for Huron City Schools. Next slide, please. Whenever we have to make a decision of this magnitude, we have to keep in mind that this has never been done before. We have never been asked to start school in the manner that we are going to start school this year. So there is no playbook, there is no handbook, and we're going to be making decisions that are very emotional for all of us as parents especially. It's going to touch on our emotions. There are many schools of thought, many opinions, many research-based. With that said, there's an awful lot of noise out there. And what we have to do to make these decisions, we felt that we've had to outline guiding principles. It's kind of a checkpoint or a recalibration, if you will, that brings us back to really what we're working for and what we want to accomplish. So we've outlined several guiding principles to help guide us through the noise, guide us through the uncertainty. And our first guiding principle is really the most obvious: educating children. That is our business. We need to make sure, to the best of our ability, that we are providing quality educational opportunities for every child who attends Huron City Schools. Along with that, just as important, and probably in some instances more important at this snapshot in time, is we need to make sure we are reducing, and with all luck, I will say luck, that we are eliminating any opportunities for contamination or spread of COVID-19. That is an absolute priority as we continue along this restart journey. Something we committed to back as early as March 13th, when we were first told we had to close. We committed to, as a guiding principle, that we will communicate on a regular basis to all of our stakeholders, most importantly to you, our parents. We feel that that's critical, to be transparent, to provide you with the most up-to-date information as possible as we receive it. And it will also allow you to have a snapshot into our thinking process. We'll continue that, and I think what we're doing today with the 2 community forums is just another example of our commitment to communicating with you as stakeholders. A fourth guiding principle, again, should be no surprise that we need to support the academic, but we also need to make sure we're supporting the social and the emotional needs of our students and our staff and our families. This has been a traumatic experience for all of us on so many levels, and it is our responsibility as a school system to make sure that we are addressing these needs outside of the academic realm. And the last guiding principle that we have is very important, and I'm going to stress this throughout the presentation this evening and throughout this entire process, that we have to recognize that these plans are going to evolve and they're going to change. And they're going to evolve and they're going to change on a dime. We could receive information next week that tells us what we're talking about today is going to be pushed aside because we'll have to go in another direction. We have to recognize that as a possibility. So with that said, Dr. McDonald, next slide, please. As I mentioned, what we're dealing with is very much the unknown. The science is evolving, the research is evolving. So much of the decisions that we will make, much of those thoughts that we have to guide those decisions are going to be based on general assumptions, because there's so much that we do not know. So we're assuming things are going to change, and we have to plan for that. One of the things that we are assuming, based on everything that's been happening things that we're hearing is we're going to most likely experience rolling closures throughout the school year. Now, those rolling closures could be possibly a classroom, it could be a building, it could be multiple buildings, it could be an entire district. That could happen for 1 day, 2 days, a week, a month. We have to anticipate and assume that that can possibly happen. So that factors into the decision making and planning that we're doing right now. And I hope, quite frankly, that 6 months from now, a year from now, that each one of you can come back to me and say, you were wrong with that. And I hope that is the case. But right now, this is what we're assuming is going to happen. A second general assumption is decisions that will close buildings or facilities will most likely be made at the local or regional levels. I don't anticipate, but I'm wrong often with these things, that it could come from the state level as we experienced last spring. But I would expect or assume that these decisions will be more of a local flavor for at least the coming fall. A third assumption that we have is that individuals, I'm talking students and staff, are going to have health conditions that are going to need special accommodations. They're going to need special services, special resources that can be absolutely impactful to teaching and learning. So we're assuming that. We can also assume that preventative and safety protocols will be reinforced, and I will talk about these more in depth as we go through our presentation. But we have to assume that these are going to be in place for the time being, what we call the new normal. And some of these preventative measures, quite frankly, are going to will be uncomfortable. Some of you will agree with these preventative measures. Some are going to feel they're unnecessary. And all those are legitimate responses, and I respect that. But again, these are going to be part of what we have to do if we want to become a school that brings kids back face to face. Part of that assumption, then, we have to expect there are going to be concerns for safety. I've heard from many of you, many parents, not only in our first presentation this morning, but throughout the survey, the calls that we've made, through formal and informal conversations with you. There are general concerns for safety, legitimate concerns. There are concerns about the quality of education that we're going to be providing under these circumstances. Legit, I respect them, but those are assumptions that we have to own and we have to address. We also have to assume, which I'm very grateful for, that there's going to be continued collaboration, not only internally amongst our Huron education family, but with our colleagues, our teacher colleagues, our administrator colleagues, our board colleagues. Continued collaboration with our health experts, Mr. Shade and his team. From the state level, the Ohio Department of Health. Information will continually be shared back and forth. And the final assumption, and I don't have it on our slide here, but it's an absolute assumption that I guess internally that we have to embrace, and I would suppose you, meaning me as well as parents, that we're going to have to embrace, that all of the decisions that are made from this point forward are not going to meet the needs of every child, every family. They may not even meet the beliefs or personal opinions of our families, of our teachers. That's a reality that we have to assume will be there. So we have to address that and understand that that is something we will have to deal with, both from a school perspective and from us as families and parents have to deal with that as well. Next slide, please. Our ReStart plan, you will see as we go through the conversation, is based on what most leading health experts feel is a best practice to bringing students back to school successfully, and that means safe and educationally sound. We are embracing what we're calling a multi-layered plan for protection. Again, this is research-based, endorsed by the Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, the Ohio Department, the Erie County Departments of Health, the Surgeon General, the CDC. This is the best practice. And this is, we're going to rely on you as parents, us as parents. The first general layer of protection starts at home. That general layer of protection is called a symptoms assessment. And we're asking our families to conduct a symptoms assessment of each child before you send them to school. That symptoms assessment is you are just either talking to your child or observing your child to see if they are experiencing symptoms related to COVID. That would be muscle aches, a runny nose, nausea, having a temperature. When you send your child to school, to the best of your knowledge, the best of your evaluation, your child is symptom free when you send them to school. We are doing the same thing with our faculty and staff. We are asking them to symptoms assess themselves before they arrive to work. If they are experiencing symptoms, just like your child, we're asking them to stay home. When each faculty and staff arrives to their school building or their department daily, they will report to the office of that department or building. They will sign in and check a box, checking a box, verifying to the best of their evaluation that they are symptom free. They will also take their temperature on location. We'll provide them with a thermometer, and they will check a second box, if you will, verifying that their temperature is below the threshold of 100.4. That's the threshold that leading health experts say regarding fever. So with you as parents, when you take your child's temperature each morning, we're asking you to do that. If your child has a temperature of 100.4 or above, or any of the other symptoms, not only keep your child at home, you may want to consult medical attention as well. So that's the first layer of protection, a symptoms assessment. The second layer of this multi-layered approach is robust hand washing protocols. I just learned Monday that there is an actual art, if you will, to washing hands. There's a proper way and a not proper way to do that. We are going to be educating our children when they're in school with a tutorial that is provided by the Erie County Health Department. That is the second line or layer of defense to curbing the spread of not only COVID for that matter, but any other type of illness as well. Second layer, robust hand washing. Third layer, disinfecting and sanitizing high-touch areas frequently. That will be built into our daily routine. The fourth layer of protection is the physical distancing. And most leading health experts are saying that preferred distance is 6 feet for a majority of the time. We are embracing that concept, and that is a major reason of why we are going with a hybrid model. And I'll talk more in length about that as well. But the physical distancing of 6 feet for a majority of the time a student is in school. And the final layer of protection is a face covering. We are mandating that students K through 12 will wear face covering at a majority of the day. That includes faculty and staff as well. And I'll talk more at length about that as we go through the presentation. But those are the 5 layers of protection which are endorsed as a best practice by a majority of health experts. Next slide, please. So what does all of this mean for Huron City Schools? What you all want to know or already know is we are going to embrace with what we know today with what will be called a rolling start to the 2021 school year. That will look like as follows. Our start will be a reduced capacity or hybrid opening. We will embrace the 5 layers of protection, of multi-layered protection will be followed. All of our faculty and staff will report each day. They will be on campus, either working with children, preparing lessons, etc. The reduced capacity or hybrid opening that we're following, we will review this in the first 30 days. And the great thing about starting with the hybrid, if you're thinking of a continuum of how to start school, a full remote to the full left, a hybrid to the center, and a full return to the right. Well, we're shooting in the middle here, and within those 30 days, we will reevaluate. Do we have the capacity? Have we been able to master the 5 layers of protection? Have things changed around our surrounding area with COVID spread? that maybe we can start bringing more children back before we enter fall. But also, I think it is a reality that we have to embrace during that 30-day review, depending on what's happening in and around our area with COVID. We could potentially go to a more remote form of delivery as well. So we built that review in, so we are ready to pivot either direction as circumstances dictate. One of the things we are doing with our rolling start is we are moving the first student day back. This is a revision to Monday, August 31st. We were traditionally to start on the 26th, but we feel since we are starting in a method that we have never experienced before as teachers, as educators, as support staff, as administrators, we feel that we need to take the time to prepare what all of this will look like in our buildings, what a reduced capacity looks like, how are student schedules modified, how are their routines modified, how will lunches work, how will restrooms breaks work, how will recess work. While we're talking about all of these things and we're writing them out on a playbook, if you will, we still have to walk it and see it and experience from the student's eyes. So really in a nutshell, that is why we are looking at the August 31st. But it'll also allow our teachers some planning time to create banks of lessons in the event that we have to pivot to a more of a remote model moving forward. So next slide, please. So what does a rolling start or a hybrid model look like in play? So for the next several slides, we'll talk about this hybrid model from an operations standpoint, from an academic standpoint, and from a student services and supports pillar as well. So physical distancing protocols will be followed. As I mentioned earlier, the 6 feet will be reinforced for a majority of the time. That includes classrooms. Desks will be 6 feet apart. That will include hall traffic. That will include cafeteria time, recess, etc. And again, that's the 6 feet apart during majority of the time. Face covering will be required when that 6 feet physical distancing bubble cannot be met. Now, here's the great thing about the 6 feet. When we are at our desk, teachers instructing, and we're 6 feet apart, children and faculty and staff will be able to remove their face covering. That is why we have chosen the 6 feet model versus what some districts may be embracing, 3 feet or less, but they're required to wear their face coverings all day with limited or no breaks. And that's guidance from the Erie County Health Department. So those face coverings will be required when 6 feet cannot be met for a majority of the time. We will provide students and staff, all students and staff, with face coverings. Staff will have an opportunity to utilize face shields. We'll provide a limited number of those tools, if you will, for students and staff. We're going to modify student and staff schedules. Obviously, if we are running at a reduced capacity, we'll have something called an A or B, which is a red and gray schedule, where students will report on their day, with a third day that will be built into the schedule for students with specific needs. Also, as we talked about daily routines, I mentioned this previously, no longer will we have whole group taking restroom breaks or breaks to the drinking fountain, going to recess or eating in large groups gathering. All of those things will be modified that we are working on at the individual building level. Visitation to our buildings will be limited to most likely emergency situations. Any visitor entering our facilities will be required to wear a face covering. Hand sanitizing stations will be located throughout the buildings. Each classroom will have hand sanitizing dispensers. This will include our buses as well. And as I mentioned earlier in our presentation, that we are going to reinforce frequent hand washing. That will actually be built in, hand washing breaks for students throughout the day. because again, that is one of our first or second layers of our multi-layered protection approach. Next slide, please. The spacing of all desks and tables, we will do everything within our power, within reason, to make sure they are 6 feet apart, allowing us that flexibility with the masks and making sure we are following that best practice of 6 feet. Building access points will be reduced. That means we are going to limit the entry and exit points of all of our buildings. This is to allow us to have proper hand sanitizing located there, and also for disinfecting protocols. If we limit the spaces that we know where students are entering and exiting, that will allow us to better address those areas. Arrival and dismissal times will be modified. It will most likely look like a staggered approach. No longer will we just release all students to their buses, all students to parent pickup, or to the student parking lot if they provide their own transportation. This will be modified. So again, we are creating a scenario where large group gatherings will not be able to take place. That's why we want to create these protocols. All high-touch surfaces and objects will be disinfected frequently throughout the day. This will occur not only by our maintenance, our custodials, our support staff will be involved, teachers will play a role in this, the administration will play a role in this, and also students will have a role in this as well. The next point here under operations is that our district has identified as a best practice that we will continue to have an inventory of safety and disinfecting supplies of 2 to 4 months. We would like to have a 4-month supply, but we understand due to need and desire to have these supplies, we will go as low as 2 months. But we feel going below the 2-month level would be critical, and that is not something that we will allow to happen. Next slide, please. Operations continuing. As I mentioned, modifying student routines. This includes a reduced capacity in eating areas. This may look different in each building. For example, we have some buildings that are looking at adding additional lunch periods throughout the day. Other buildings will utilize alternative spaces such as cafeterias, gymnasiums, etc. And again, the goal of this is to continue to keep large gatherings of students from happening, and also to keep students together with their cohorts when possible. We will limit or eliminate the sharing of student supplies. No longer will students be passing their scissors or their glue bottles amongst their peers, again, for obvious reasons. We will limit or eliminate the use of lockers. Again, this will allow us to avoid large group gatherings. We will institute one-way hallway traffic when possible. I know our building task force teams are working on putting these plans together. And again, we want to minimize the opportunities for students to pass within that 6 feet physical distancing barrier, especially face-to-face. So one-way hall traffic will help us achieve that. Separate sick rooms for students who are experiencing something that could be construed as possible symptoms. Maybe they're feeling nauseous, maybe they have a headache, maybe they have a cough or experiencing a temperature. We're creating a separate sick room for those students. We want to keep them separated from students or children who have, example, may catch a bump during phys ed class and they have to have an ice pack. We want to create separation there. And again, to that guiding principle that I mentioned earlier, to minimize, reduce, or eliminate opportunities or situations for exposure. Transportation. Transportation, we, like some districts, are modifying transportation services. For example, eliminating transportation for grades 7 through 12, or modifying boundaries to reduce the number of students on a bus. We're not doing that. We will continue offering transportation services at this time, K to 12, regardless of boundary. But we are mandating that every student that participates in our transportation services, that they will wear face coverings from the time they enter a bus to the time they exit a bus. We will, at this point, look at having one student per seat when possible. We understand that that may not be feasible with our embracing, continuing offering a full service of transportation. So that may mean that we have more than one student to a bus on those rare occasions. And again, we feel that we have that extra layer of protection because of wearing face coverings. Prior to entering a bus, or as they are entering a bus, we'll have a hand sanitizing dispenser there. All children will be asked to take a squirt of the hand sanitizer before sitting. We'll have students fill from the back forward. And as they are exiting the bus, they will take a squirt. We're asking students to take a squirt of hand sanitizer as well. Now, again, you may interpret what we're doing as, again, some may feel we're going a bit above and beyond, and you may interpret that we're kind of mother henning a little bit here, but we're taking this responsibility of keeping every child, every faculty member, every parent as safe as we possibly reasonably can do. Next slide, please. Still under operations. Our custodial staff, they will be trained on the proper use of utilizing disinfecting equipment. Our district has invested heavily on the state-of-the-art technology as far as disinfecting. You may observe one of or more of our custodians or maintenance personnel with a large backpack that looks rather odd. We've purchased backpack sprayers, one per building. These allow us to disinfect at a much quicker pace, a much larger area. Quite frankly, it allows us to do a more thorough job because we can do a high and low disinfectant when it would be much more challenging to do that by hand, to reach some of the high spaces, low spaces, and do it with fidelity. So we've purchased backpack sprayers. We've also purchased disinfectant foggers that will be utilized. That's another form of sprayer for more of our smaller common areas. We can cover more ground, if you will, with these sprayers. We've also purchased multi-purpose sprayers for every classroom. So we have that as well. We also are utilizing hospital grade and CDC approved chemicals. If you'd like to know specifically what those are, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to share those with you. Drinking fountains, it is recommended as a best practice that's no longer utilizing traditional drinking fountains. So we are replacing more of our traditional fountains with bottle filling stations. We started this process last year. We're going to amplify it this year because of COVID, where we are retrofitting some of our older fountains into water filling stations. Traditional drinking fountains that have not been converted will be turned off. We also are purchasing every student a water bottle. Doesn't mean they cannot bring their own, but we feel since this is something that is being mandated, we want to make sure every child has a water bottle at their disposal each day. So we'll be purchasing a limited number of those as well. Water filling stations will be sanitized daily. We're asking our parents nightly to disinfect those water bottles before your child returns to school with those. Our athletic department and co-curricular activities, developing safety protocols aligned with the local, state, and federal guidelines. For example, our athletic department is working hand in hand with the Ohio High School Athletic Association. Under their direction, we've created a 3-phase ReStart protocol, if you will, that's been implemented. As far as music, and band, and choir, we'll follow recommendations from their professional organizations. And of course, the health officials, the safety experts can guide us with that as well. temporary closures, anytime a building or facility, a building, or the district is closed, we will be coordinating those decisions with the Erie County Health Department and any other local or state-run health agency that is necessary. But we will be coordinating very closely with Mr. Shade and his team. What will happen if a building or classroom or a building is closed because of something related to COVID or any medical reason for that matter? A very robust disinfecting protocol will be initiated where it'll be a top-down, side-to-side disinfecting strategy will take place. Next slide, please. At this point, those are the operational aspects of what a hybrid restart will look like. And I'm sure if you are like me and most others, we probably have created more questions than answers because every time I give this presentation, I think of something different and I'm jotting notes down that I have to address with our team. And that's okay. This will be ongoing. This plan will be altered. It will be tweaked along the way. I'll just ask that if you have questions, you enter them in the chat room, or you can always email me directly. But at this point, I would like to turn our presentation over to Dr. Julie McDonald, and she can talk about what this will look like from the academic standpoint of a hybrid restart. Dr. McDonald?
Thank you, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. I know everybody is busy, and we just appreciate you taking the time to join us. So a little background at arriving at this decision. We did, as Mr. Moratori has stated, begin working on this as soon as we found out that we weren't coming back in the traditional manner this spring. So we recognize that the learning outcomes for our students this spring were uneven, and going into this fall, how do we best possibly close the instructional gaps that we know about, both from a curriculum perspective to standards we didn't cover to making sure the online environment, getting that working for students, and also for students who excelled at it, improving it as well. So in early May, Mr. Moratori organized us into teams, and the academic team began meeting on a weekly basis. This provided a framework for the district to work in, and each building is then tasked with using that framework to come up with their building level decisions as it relates to operations, academics, and support services. So as we transitioned into summer, the last week of school, while students were finishing up assignments, teachers were meeting to have those vertical alignment conversations. We also offered in June the opportunity for teachers to do the summer learning institutes. This is an opportunity where the teachers came together through Zoom and worked with a professor from Baylor on grit in the classroom and perseverance. It was a very timely opportunity. And then as well, we are training all of our teachers in the Google Classroom experience. This will be our major learning management system for this school year. It covers all our options. It covers a full return, it covers our reduced capacity hybrid model, and then if the challenge comes where we need to go full remote, it'll be our platform still, and families and students and teachers can toggle in there. It's a one-stop shop for all the information. We recognize through the parent survey and different communication avenues that there's just too many things this past spring to keep a hold of. Where do I log in? Where do I sign up? Where do I look for this assignment? So we hope this experience using the Google Classroom platform streamlines that for all our stakeholders, quite frankly. So this summer too, we recently mailed out invitations to certain students for the summer learning camp. That will begin that first week in August. And as I mentioned, the teams are working on their building plans. The opening week for staff, as Mr. Moratori has mentioned, with pushing back the opening date to August 31st, will allow us to shore up the experience for students. So we'll be doing walkthroughs with staff, trainings that are provided by the Erie County Health Department, and just doubling down on our collaboration. I can't say enough for the collaboration that has happened during this process, as Mr. Muratori talked about, our professional networks, even the informal conversations at line at Drug Mart, people just engaging and sharing ideas. And quite frankly, we took them all. There was no idea that was too strange or out there. We really started at a macro level, and each week we just funneled it down to what you're seeing this evening. So everybody's efforts, I can't say enough, it's been greatly appreciated. We don't want to waste a good challenge, as one of our colleagues has said. So with that, um, we know we have different options from the full return where students are back 5 days a week, our traditional model. We also know that the traditional model does not work for some students. So this fall, we'll be offering the Huron Virtual Academy for families who prefer to stay at home in this situation with the pandemic, but also for students who the traditional attendance in a school setting isn't for them. So more information will be coming out as to what that looks like. And then we're also asking, as you can see from the slide, that families commit to this option if they are in fact committing, that they do 9 weeks at a time. So the idea behind that is if a student finds that they prefer the face-to-face in the building instruction, we can transition students back at a timely and reasonable rate rather than waiting to the semester. So like I said, we're still working on what that looks like. It is not the same thing as you saw this spring. It is different. So more information, including how to sign up, will be forthcoming. So as Mr. Muratori has stated, we are starting off with a reduced capacity. Again, this will allow us to have students on site 2 days a week, and then they will attend virtually for 3 days. Students will be assigned either a red or a gray day. If they're red, they attend on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then on gray, Wednesdays and Fridays. Tiger Day is our Monday. That operates a little bit differently. Tiger Day can be for students who need related services, small group instruction or assessment. It could be for large group assessment. This may be some sort of summative assessment where, say, a class at the high school like chemistry needs to have it proctored in person. They can have students in the gym far enough apart to do that where kids would come in. The Tiger Day could also be used for educator meetings. There are certain times where we need to have educators together to make decisions and work for the betterment of students, and we would rather not pull them out of instructional time with our students. So some of you may have been invited to meetings through the IST. That would be an example of that, or an IEP meeting, those types of things. And then, of course, students will be able to do remote learning at that time. So there may be a fourth grade class that wants to get online together at that time. They can do that on Mondays. Now, when your student is home, if they are, if their day is assigned to attend in person on Tuesday, Thursday, the remote learning on Wednesday, Friday is not sitting on the computer logging into the classroom. It is an asynchronous model, if you will, and that students are not expected to sit on a computer from 8 to 3. That is not best practice. It doesn't work for families. If there are issues, we know with childcare and parents working, students can work on this in the evening. And there'll be resources available. So off days could be used for project building. If students are assigned projects, that time could be used then. Also, you know, if a certain content or a certain skill set is being discussed the next day, teachers may assign video clips for students to watch in preparation of. We like to call that front loading, or being part of a flipped classroom. So, and then the last model is the full remote. This does not include our Huron Virtual Academy students. This would be the students who are attending school face-to-face in some manner. So this is what most closely resembles, what we did this spring. Again, using that Google platform. There are some classes at the high school that use Schoology and Canvas. Canvas you'll likely see in our College Credit Plus programs. It's a platform that universities use. And so there will be a schedule. If we do go full remote, there will be a schedule for students to attend. Each building will have an individual schedule. So teachers aren't bumping into each other. So if you have to attend Algebra 2, we're not scheduling your English class at the same time. So those details will be forthcoming as well, hoping that we actually don't have to use that model. So we like our students in the building. So with that, as Mr. Muratori has also stated, the social emotional aspect of all students, our staff, and our families is very important to us. Everybody has experienced this pandemic in a different way, and we have to acknowledge that and making sure our needs are met. So we will be continuing using the CASEL framework. It's a great group. It's nationally recognized, provides lots of resources, and we're also going to have counselors in all the buildings this year. So very excited about that opportunity and service for students. We also know that families are going to need resources. So this spring, we were able to put out about 300 devices from our buildings for families who needed them. We'll be able to offer this service again. As you know, if a computer is being used in the classroom and your student, it's their day to stay home, they might need a computer. So we'll be offering that again, as well as still having the bring your own device policy that we have in the district if students want to bring their device from home. Computers may not be an everyday occurrence. They are a tool, just like a calculator, a textbook. It just depends what is going on that day, and teachers will be communicating with students if they need that. If we go full remote, we'll be able to put those out on the street, and information on how to access that service will be shared later on this summer. So one thing that was difficult for all of us this spring was attendance taking with the full remote. Basically, the guidance we got from Columbus was good luck. That has since been changed with House Bill 164. So it's very important to note that attendance will be taken and counted in all formats this year. So if your student is attending face-to-face, it'll be our attendance policy as usual. If your student is attending online, there'll be time logging and completion of assignments that will be taken into consideration for that attendance policy. So we like to have everybody engaged and everybody participating in their education. And if that doesn't happen, we are held to House Bill 410, which requires us to start proceedings with an attendance intervention team, where we'll get everybody together with the family and try to figure out the barriers to that attendance. And that goes all the way to truancy charges. So we don't want to have to do that. So in all these formats, we want to make sure that students and families are engaged. So with that, as Mr. Muratori mentioned, we did do a parent survey back July 10th. And I appreciate the nugget that a parent shared, that, sometimes we just think of surveys as if you want to. And so we get that. So we did do some cold calling just to get a better take. And you can see the responses here. We're about 30% still wanted that online learning option, or we're still undecided. So we feel this helps in our decision making, and we'll continue to communicate in ways through this. So, looking at using our final forms to send information out. We'll probably use the word survey for things that, it's up to you if you want to participate, but then stronger language choices if we needed to fill something out going forward. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Holly Charville. She is our Director of Special Education.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for your patience and attentiveness to our presentation this evening. With supports and services, our group got together and really delved into all of those supports and services that might be encountered by our students here at Huron City Schools. And one of the first things that we wanted to make sure we were addressing was that staff professional development opportunities were made available to our teachers. As you know, the remote learning process was a challenge, and we wanted to make sure that our teachers all had the opportunity to have instruction in learning management systems. And so we have worked diligently to have them all Google One trained. There continues to be opportunities for our teachers to engage in further professional development. We are strongly recommending our use of peer-to-peer teaching, which would include teachers teaching teachers. We have some great folks and resources, not only in-house, but in the community, that are able to assist our folks in bringing a little bit more fun and excitement to the virtual classrooms. Again, as Dr. McDonald had mentioned, teachers have a designated learning management system, and primarily we're using Google Classroom with a few other outliers such as Schoology and Canvas, just depending on the teacher and or the course offering being given. Our learning management systems will be updated by teachers and linked to Progress Book, and we will continue to train our staff in social emotional learning techniques, which we had done at the end of last school year. And those will be used during their school day with our children. And that information then will be shared with you at home. For family supports, we definitely realized that we needed to have a glossary of the verbiage that we're using. IST, IEP, those things mean nothing to a lot of you, but it means something near and dear to some of you. And those are the terms that we want to make sure that we are articulating those definitions to you. An LMS or a learning management system, just so that you have that information as a quick reference. Clearly defined learning management systems are what we're really looking at for our teachers, with expectations for participation, work completion, and work return. Those will be huge this year, as well as then that defined attendance policy in periods of remote learning for our children. Our virtual and face-to-face accessibility was one of the things we had heard in the survey that our parents were wanting more of. So we're going to be able to offer one-to-one opportunities for our school psychologists to meet with parents and or children, and our counselors as well, just to be that additional resource for social emotional support and potentially references and, like I said, resources available to families. As Dr. McDonald had alluded as well, it's great that we have a guidance counselor per building this year. Those guidance counselors will be very helpful in our ability to address the social emotional components from our children. And at the high school level, our guidance counselor will also be that access point for those of you who have high school students for things like community service opportunities or job exploration and college visits, as those things are things you're starting to look at graduation time. Our guidance counselor will have the availability to meet with you and your children to help guide you through that process. The accessibility for teachers and related service personnel. We have contact information that will be readily available to you parents through our school website. You'll be able to know our teachers' email addresses and their phone line extensions. We've been able to have our phone lines connect straight to our email addresses, so that if you send a voice message, it will go into our Gmail accounts. And we had that guiding principle, as Mr. Muratori had alluded, of providing good communication. So we want to make sure that that is robust through our emails, through final forms, through Remind, with a 24-hour response time as our goal. This will help reduce some periods of questioning, troubleshooting, accessibility to the learning management system. Say you forgot a password or a username, or maybe something's just not working correctly. That's where that will help you guide through that process. Our face-to-face and or learning opportunities for our kids and for their caregivers, you parents, we're going to give you video vignettes of the how-tos, how to access my learning management system, how to troubleshoot the computer's camera, how to properly wash my hands. So those are the things that we'll have video vignettes available to our parents, accessible on our website. Our staff hours will also be located on the website so that you'll know the best time to reach our staff members, especially on that Tiger Monday, should your child not be in school on that day. And our therapists also have accessibility and office hours posted as well. With regard to connectivity, support, and technology access, again, Huron will partner with the local cable company to verify address access points and help troubleshoot and get you those connections if you still need those. Also, with our ability to either bring your own device, if your child prefers their own device, that is not a problem. And if you don't have a device, the fact that the staff will provide, or the school will issue a device to your child, is just a great opportunity to not have to worry who's on the computer when. Technology flowchart was one of the things that we had determined was a need, again, offered to you parents in order to provide expedited answers when trying to manage the computer, any technology questions, how to gain access to that learning management systems, how to troubleshoot the camera, and who those contact persons would be to, again, bring some flow and quickness to your response time. Our food service operations were very diligent at the start of the closure all the way through June, attempting and trying to serve as many meals to our students during the closure. And again, we will have options for meals when students are not on site. Those are all being currently worked out through our Director of Operations with the guidance from the USDA as well. So you'll probably be hearing more about food service options available to your children. Next slide, please. One of the other components that we use as a guiding principle, again, is not only to support our academics, but also to look at social emotional needs. And we know that our children and our families, all of us have experienced trauma in this pandemic, and we're continuing to face trauma. And so we don't want to overlook that, but we know that socio-emotional components are a huge part of the learning process. And with that said, we're going to continue using our strategies that we've been learning through our SEL process in the classroom. We also want to offer that SEL support opportunities for our caregivers, our parents. And so just to note that our caregivers will have access to school personnel, meaning our school psychologist, as well as our guidance counselors for that resource and referral information to provide you also with an extra layer of support for social emotional learning and or resources in the home. Our teachers also get that. If you're worried about our teachers are also being covered through our insurance consortium. So we are making sure that we're also meeting the needs of the folks that are working diligently with your children. Tiger Day, that Monday, will be used to provide identified students with not only enrichment activities, but remediation, some direct service supports, as was alluded by Dr. McDonald, large group and small group assessments, one-on-one assessments. That's a day that's going to help us with those students who have been identified as having specific needs that need to be addressed in order to maximize testing outcome or to reduce learning concerns that might be showing up as through our intervention support team or our IST. Licensed before and after school services has also been a hot topic, and we wanted to make sure that our parents understand that our Tiger Kids Club is planning to be returned in the fall here. We will be providing that in a reduced capacity following state licensure requirements. And additional information will be provided out to families in the upcoming weeks. So please make sure you're checking our website for that information. And at this time, I'd like to thank you again for joining us tonight, and I'm going to turn the presentation back to Mr. Muratori.
Thank you, Mrs. Charvel, and also thank you, Dr. McDonald. And again, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Communication plan. Our third guiding principle that I mentioned, our commitment to communication. Just want to share with you how we will continue communicating what's been happening. Yesterday morning, I met with our Board of Education, reviewed a very similar presentation to our board, letting them know what we are thinking as we move forward. Yesterday afternoon, before noon, I then conducted a Zoom meeting with Dr. McDonald and Mrs. Charville's assistants. We gave a similar presentation to all of our faculty and staff. So they are hearing the latest and greatest. And then yesterday afternoon, I participated in a question and answer session at the Sandusky Register with several of our local professionals. This morning, we rolled out a similar presentation to approximately 190, almost 200 participants joined in a Zoom forum such as this. And this evening, we're presenting, obviously, that you're attending. Next week, we're asking you to watch from our website and our social media pages. Each building will be releasing a short 5 to 8 minute video outlining a little bit more specific to their building what the hybrid will look like. Now again, in 5 to 8 minutes, details will not be absolutely comprehensive, but you're getting now a better view, a snapshot from the building perspective of what this will look like. We'll start on Monday with McCormick, and through each day we will release another building, and we'll finalize this or culminate on Friday, July 31st, with a video regarding transportation from our Director of Operations, Mrs. Zilski. As Mrs. Charville mentioned, please continue watching and following your Final Forms email. We're finding that that is the most convenient way for us to communicate with parents. We will also be updating our website as new information becomes available. And of course, social media, we will be having announcements there as well. And again, I hope this just is evidence to show that we are committed to that guiding principle of constant and continuous communication. Next slide, please. Just a final reminder, if you will. We have the words here, adapt and adjust. And as I mentioned during our first presentation this morning, these are so much greater terms than just words on a paper, especially times like now. We're living in the moment. And we've said multiple times tonight that this is a novel situation. It's new, it's evolving as we speak. And I would be remiss if I did not say to you all that this is going to be messy. We have never done this before. There are absolutely hundreds and hundreds of moving parts. And every time we discuss it and a question is shared, we learn new things as we go. So it's going to be messy. It's going to be probably frustrating for us all, for us as parents, for us as educators, for us as for students especially. And it's going to be stressful. It is going to cause stress for us all. It's not going to be perfect. So we have to embrace the fact that we have to adapt and we have to adjust, and we're going to react based on current data, on current situation with the pandemic, and any recommendation that comes down to us from local, state, or federal levels. We have to make sure that we understand that, and we're going to be methodical in the decisions that we make. We're going to be strategic, and we're never going to make a decision that we feel will undermine the academic opportunities for kids, and we will not do something that we feel will place a student in harm's way that goes against what the leading health experts tell us. We're committed to that. Next slide, please. Before we go into some Q&A here, I want you to take a look at this slide. You're going to see your child's principal. You're going to see your child's teacher. You're going to see some community members. You'll see volunteers. These are the folks that have been involved in this process since April, either at the district level or the building task force level. I hope your takeaway from this is that your teachers, your support staff, your administrators care. They care excruciatingly care about how this restart will look, what it means to our children, what it means to you as parents. They care, they're putting the work in. So I want you to recognize that, because I'm very proud of these folks. They've given their time to make sure we create the best plan possible for Huron City School students. Next slide, please. We want this to be the message to all of our children. We're waiting for them on August 31st. We cannot wait to see our hallways hustling and bustling with children, face coverings and all. We want to see them. We want them back where we think they belong. So at this point, as I said, we're going to take some time to answer some Q&A. As always, traditionally, my meetings go long, and this one is no different. We've gone an hour and 5 minutes. We'll take the next 15 plus minutes or so, and I'll have Dr. McDonald read questions off for us. But I do want to reassure you, before the end of the day Friday, we will have answers to all the questions in writing. We will email them to all of our families, so you will have access to them, and we will also post them on our district website as well. So with that said, Dr. McDonald, do you want to read some questions?
Sure. And I'll try and, Denny, as they come in, let you know what slide they kind of go with if they went with one. So
Absolutely.
this first one asks what the consequences will be if parents don't follow the policies and procedures and send kids to school sick. And this came in about the time they were talking about the symptom assessment.
Well, great question. And yes, this is on the honor system, but I believe the character of our families, the character of our community, they want to keep their own child safe. They care about the children around them. I really believe that. I believe in the character of our folks, and I understand it's not perfect. I could send one of my 3 children to school in the morning, and they would be, to my best evaluation, symptom-free, and all of a sudden they come down with something, whether it's COVID related or not. That is a fact, that is a reality. And that is just another reason why we are implying or implementing a multi-layered approach to safety and security, where there can be a gap in one layer. Think of the Swiss cheese. You butt the second layer up to that, covers that hole. You butt the 3rd layer up to that, 4th layer and 5th layer. And you see that we will create the best model possible. But let's be real, there will always be a hole in the Swiss cheese that may not line up directly, and there could obviously be a challenge. So again, believing in the character of our folks, doing something not intentional, and the multi-layered approach, I feel that gives us the best way to ensure, to the best of our ability, the health, the safety, and welfare of our children and our faculty and staff.
Okay. Next question. Has the virtual learning experience been revised to emulate the in-class experience for students? Online learning must be improved greatly from what we experienced last spring.
Great question. And as you talked about, Dr. McDonald and Mrs. Charville, we heard a lot of comments that were very complimentary, but also pointed out some areas that we can do better. And our teachers were grateful for that feedback, because again, we've never done this before. So we've implemented the Google training, utilizing the Google platform. We've also found that more one-on-one time for specific needs of children. We also learned that there will be more traditional via remote class time, if you will, that experience. So while will we be perfect? Will we ever be able to duplicate the in-classroom face-to-face experience remotely? The educator in me says no. There is absolutely no substitute for face-to-face interaction with a highly qualified Huron City Schools teacher. We can't duplicate that. But we know that we can get better with remote. We believe that because of the training, because of the feedback that we learned, that we will offer a better remote model. Again, it may not meet everyone's needs, and we'll learn from this second go around as well. So I am very confident we will be much better than we were when we closed out in the spring.
Okay, how will we how will we maintain physical distancing during lunch, breaks, and at the beginning and end of school?
Great question. That is one of the reasons why we are going with a reduced capacity schedule, just for the sheer fact of having um, less students in the building. That allows us more space to spread out. Um, as we talked about during the presentation, we are modifying the entries of the buildings, the exits of the buildings, the dismissal times will be modified. The way hall traffic will flow will be part of the modification. And again, keeping that 6 feet distance for a majority of the time, that's the best practice. And we feel by reducing just sheer numbers will allow us greatest flexibility. But we also have to understand there will be times when children will be within that 6 feet barrier or 6 feet bubble by either chance or by practice. And again, this goes back to why we are incorporating that multi-layered safety protocol, if you will, where we have a gap in one layer, the next layer will hopefully compensate for that.
Okay. And Denny, this is also has to do with operations. You were talking about the cleaning and disinfecting supplies. Would we be posting the manufacturer safety data sheets on our school website?
We could absolutely share with what those documentation will be. That outlines what the name of the chemicals we are using. I think that's absolutely something we can post on our website.
Okay.
I know a question has come up, like the pH. That was asked of me in an informal conversation. Is it neutral? Is it alkaline? So I know those questions are out there, and we can absolutely share that with our families.
Okay, Denny, this has to do with the scheduling and the days students will be attending. Will we be placing children in the same units to the same color days?
Can you, is
Yes.
that?
So as I understand it, as I'm reading it, would the students that attend Tuesday, Thursday always be the students that attend Tuesday, Thursday, and likewise Wednesday, Friday?
Yes, initially that's our thought. Again, keeping in mind we've never done this before, and one of our guiding principles of this is we do not want to create more stress or challenge from our families, because we know having children going 2 days, 3 days a week with younger children, multiple children, that this is a stressor. And we do not want to create another hurdle for our families. So we're going to work to the best of our ability to meet individual family needs. That, as we see it now, keeping that consistency would appear to be a best practice. So that's the way we're starting.
Okay. Denny, have we considered clustering the days when the students report? So for example, Monday, Tuesday for one group, have Wednesday be the Tiger Day, and then Thursday, Friday be the second cohort?
Yeah, we've thought about that, and that was our original thought. One of the reasons we pivoted from that was the fact that I believe there are 7 holidays that fall on Monday, and our concern was from a strictly an academic standpoint, losing an instructional day. We felt like that the end result of that would have been a challenge. So when you weigh that with the other strengths of the other model that you mentioned, the cluster, we felt this was the least intrusive to solid academics. But I think there's a good argument the other way, and it's certainly something we've researched. But the way we have identified it would be the Monday as the Tiger Day for that reason. Will it always stay that way? It certainly could be up for evaluation later as we run this play and see how it pans out.
And Denny, if I may, we also discussed too, 5 days was a long time for students not to be in touch with their teacher if there was a problem. And as with regards to cleaning, we're cleaning every day. So that will,
Yeah, absolutely. This decision was made less on because of cleaning, because of our cleaning protocols in place. It was strictly made on an education standpoint. So thank you, Dr. McDonald, for actually adding that. I do remember that conversation as well.
so. And then same vein, will siblings in the same household be assigned the same days?
Yes, that is our intent to do. Um, in the last session, someone mentioned just break them up by alphabet. That's really going to be our starting point, but that's only the surface. And then you have to look at siblings across buildings. We have to look at families who have children with different last names that may not correlate to the group. So while a starting point is the alphabet, we understand that there'll be a number of one-offs that we have to schedule. And again, understanding it won't be perfect, I can anticipate or assume that schedules will be evolving and being tweaked and turned a week or two into school, because so many different scenarios will pop up trying to reach that balance, but absolutely meeting the needs of our families to the best of our abilities as well. So I would encourage families who have questions regarding scheduling. I know our building principals, along with Dr. McDonald and Mrs. Charville, are meeting next Tuesday, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday, to start looking at how we will be breaking students up. And I encourage folks to share their questions or concerns with their building principals.
Okay. Um, this question has to do with students in wheelchairs. Is it acceptable to build up a shield using the wheelchair, um, since face shields will be available for staff? So just a different way it looks like of doing the face covering, making modifications for students.
Absolutely, I believe that would be absolutely more than appropriate.
Okay. And then Denny, can you talk a little bit, provide a little clarity between the Huron Virtual Academy and the reduced and full remote? Like, what is the difference between the two?
Yes. The easiest way to explain it would be the full remote, where students are learning from home. You're still engaged with your classroom teacher. In other words, if Mrs. G is my child's first grade teacher, I'm working with Mrs. G or Mrs. Cluding or Mrs. Berryhill. You're still part of it. We were placed on remote because the building or the district was closed. The Huron Virtual Academy is based on a choice. A parent does not feel comfortable sending their child to school. If it's COVID related, or quite frankly, if it's another reason, as you mentioned, Dr. McDonald, the traditional 8 to 3 school day does not meet for them. Maybe it's a student who has a child of their own. Those are not another case. So they need a different platform. You may not necessarily be with Mrs. G's first grade classroom, or you may not have Mr. Blevins for your science class. We're still working on how that, what content, how it will be delivered, and what the content will be. They'll all be aligned to state standards, but it may be from a curriculum that was developed from a third party. We may possibly have a building person, a building teacher who's responsible for, say, Shawnee or Woodlands. That's just one possibility. We are still working on that. We're working with our teacher colleagues. We actually have a meeting with several teachers on Tuesday, the 28th, to talk a little more in detail. It's taking some time because, quite frankly, we want to get this right. We want it to be quality. As I stated to the previous question or two beforehand, there is no substitute for meeting with that Huron teacher face-to-face every day. But if an alternative is needed, we want to have the next best thing. So I hope that answered that question.
Okay. Denny, can you talk a little bit too about what happens if a teacher or a student tests positive, what it looks like at the classroom building level?
Absolutely. If there is a a positive test, or if there is an exposure of a student or staff member to someone outside of school who tested positive. The protocols in place are we're communicating with the Erie County Health Department. Typically, if someone tests positive, they let us know. But if in fact that's not the case, there's immediate contact with the Erie County Health Department. They take it over from there. They then conduct what's called a situation assessment. That would include interviewing the adults who may be directly related, or maybe it's teachers around the building. They will interview students. They're going to want to find out what level of contact has that person who tested positive had, or that person who has been exposed to someone who tested positive, what has been their level of contact. That's what a situation assessment will be. This is where the multi-layered approach that we are implementing will be very critical, and quite frankly, critical at how we're following through with fidelity. That will be part of the situation assessment. They will assess the situation. They then will work directly with those individuals involved. Here on City Schools, we do not issue quarantines to anybody. That is a directive of the Erie County Health Department. They will then advise us what those next steps will be. And that is very similar to, I saw in the question related to the athletes. Those directives were given to us. What I will say was the case, the level of exposure for one of our athletes did not, after the situation assessment, they felt the level of exposure was not to a point to where we had to make a drastic move. We still closed athletics down for multiple days. That was above and beyond the directive that we were given from the Erie County Health Department, just so we could allow the situation to continue to be assessed by the health department. Again, a long answer to that question, but we follow the directive of the health department. They make the decision on closure, quarantining, etc. But our responsibility is to ensure that we are implementing those 5 layers of protection with fidelity. Can we do 2 more, Dr. McDonald? We've already gone an hour and almost 25 minutes. We'll do 2 more.
Okay, appreciate everybody hanging in there. Denny,
Yes.
could you talk a little bit about what our large enrollment classes look like? This would be, for example, band and choir.
Yes, as far as how we will implement those or the safety protocols?
Both, I believe, would be appreciated.
Okay, got it. Like, for example, I'll talk towards McCormick. I know that they are going to move choir to the auditorium. So again, we will have to implement physical distancing. What this will allow us with the reduced capacity, just having, for lack of a better number, 50% plus or minus students in each classroom like that will allow us the ability to physical distance better, achieving that 6 feet gold standard, if you will. I could see opportunities for those types of classes, band and music, to be doing more outside, especially early on when the weather is conducive to that. We will follow any recommendations regarding band playing instruments or choir singing, guidelines from the health department on that, or any other health organization. For example, band, they belong to, I believe it's OMEA, which is very similar to the OHSAA, which is for athletics. They provide guidelines aligned with best practices. So we'll absolutely be following any recommendations that they have as well.
Okay. We have some big questions here. Will there be additional support from the teacher for children with an IEP or a 504 that choose the academy, the Huron Virtual Academy? And what does this support look like? And thank you to the Chapmans for understanding that we might not have the whole answer at this point.
Yeah, well, thank you for acknowledging that, because we really don't have the full answer to that. We are still working through those details of how instruction will be delivered. I can say with a certain degree of confidence that it will be more on your own pace. That's part of the reason an academy meets the needs of such a great population. It allows students to work at their own pace, at their own time. I mean, you really have access 24/7 to the curriculum. So it will meet those specific needs, whether it's because of parents are working or maybe the student works, maybe it's on the weekend. It's really, really self-paced with the supports of a teacher who really will not have contact to guide every lesson. It will be more check-ins. It will provide grading. Again, cannot give you much more detail than that, but I'm pretty confident that's been my experience with virtual academies. While it allows that freedom, there is, in all honesty, there is less direct contact with a teacher in any virtual academy, whether it's Huron, whether it's another service provider. It does have less contact. But what we feel that our virtual academy can do, not only have the academic supports, but we truly believe in that social emotional component. You've heard that from us for over a year now. We believe that that is absolutely just as critical to student achievement as, quite frankly, a new piece of hardware, technology hardware, a new instructional strategy. That social emotional piece is absolutely critical, and we're committed to embedding that into our virtual academy. Dr. McDonald, can we do one more? We're bumping up against 7:30, and I want to be respectful of people's time, but I love this. One more.
Okay, so Denny, the transition between if a family opts into the Huron Virtual Academy, what does that look like if a student wants to come back to the buildings or vice versa after 9 weeks or 18 weeks? And is that curriculum the same?
Good question. The first question is we're doing it 9 weeks at a time, just for continuity's sake, for the students in and out, but they can opt into it at a different time throughout the year. If they start traditional and they opt into it, it'll just be a 9-week time, if you will. As far as curriculum, again, I don't have all the answers yet, but there is a possibility it may not be directly created by a Huron City Schools teacher. It can be a curriculum that is purchased, but it will be a curriculum that is aligned with the Ohio state standards and with the federal standards for the math and language arts. We're committed to that, but it may not be the exact lesson or instructional delivery, if you will, as our beloved teachers, just because of the sheer nature of a virtual academy. So there obviously will most likely be some differences to it. But again, I will reiterate that it will be aligned to state and federal content standards. At this point in time, again, I thank you for your patience. You've all been wonderful listeners. I would much rather meet with you in person and have this dialogue, but circumstances do not allow us to do that right now. But I appreciate you hanging in there, asking phenomenal questions. We will, again, provide written responses to all the questions. We will email them to our families via final forms, and we will post them on our website. Committed to getting these to you by Friday, by the end of the day. And that's our effort moving forward. But again, keep reaching out to your building principals, reaching out to Dr. McDonald, Mrs. Charville, myself. Your questions are valued, your input's valued. Again, thank you. And we are committed to continued communication with you all. Have a great night, and we'll talk with you soon. Thanks, everybody.